A Maze of Death by Philip K. Dick. This was a weird one. I'm just jumping right into the video. Thanks for joining me. I read this in two sittings. Uh, I read real late at night, drank some coffee, which, speaking of, I have some coffee this morning in my Prancing Pony mug. Oh, yeah. And I stayed up late drinking coffee, getting through a lot of this. And then the next morning, I finished it and flew through this faster than pretty much any other book I've read. Um, and I'll just start by saying this is always kind of this specific book, like with the font choice, the cover, the fact that it's PKD has always kind of invited me to read this. Ever since I've gone into the science fiction rabbit hole, this is just for some reason always called out to me. I thought it was cool, and I'm glad I read it. I'll kind of cover a few high level things, and then I'll get into some spoilers and stuff. Um, I think this book is a really good example of what you get when Philip K. Dick writes with a flair of it's that are we in reality or are we tripping out? Are these characters uh, you know are they hallucinating? Is PKD on some crazy drugs writing this? Like, if you know anything about him and his story, his history, um, events in his life, I think it helps. At least it adds to the reading experience a little bit, knowing the kind of writer he was and the kind of person he was, because you know there are moments in this book where he'll introduce something and I'm like, that came out of left field completely, leading me to believe that something's not right. There's the uncanny valley effect of whatever is going on is leading me to believe that there's you know a greater thing at play here that we don't know about. And again, I'm not spoiling anything. I just think a lot of PKD novels probably have that kind of effect. This is only the second that I've read by him. I have also read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which, funny enough, I'm reviewing this before I'm actually reviewing that, which I read that months ago. So that'll come up on the channel here soon. Do Androids Dream will come up soon. But for now, since I just finished this two days ago, um, I'm I'm working on trying to get some more videos out that are just my top of mind thoughts, really fresh, right afterwards. Um, the high level plot is we follow a group of people who are going to this new planet called Delmac O, or is it Delmac Zero? I think it's just Delmac O. Anyway, they go to this new planet, this new area. They're transferred. Their jobs are like, you get a new job on this other planet, and they don't really get any instructions. They don't really know why they're going there. But all of them are going because they just they just want a job change, is what I kind of gathered from it. Um, and so they show up on this planet, and they still don't really know what they're doing there. They're waiting for instructions from the company that hired them, and uh, from there, that's really all I can say without getting into some bonkers stuff, because that's only the first couple chapters, and then you really, like, 50 pages in, the last 130 pages are just a roller coaster of weirdness, as you would expect from PKD. And so if you've not read this, if you don't want to know more about the specifics, I would stop the video here. I'm going to start putting chapters in my videos if I can remember to do that after each video, to at least try to block with spoilers so that you can see where the spoilers start. Um, so yeah, with that, spoilers ahead. Be warned. When they get to Delmaco and start to realize that something's not quite right, they don't know why they're there. They start kind of questioning few of them have been there for months. They start questioning: is this some kind of like experiment, or is it a prison that they're all sent to? I found that really interesting early on that's mentioned, um, and you see things mostly through a character named Seth. I think we open on a guy named Ben, but most of the story is told from Seth's perspective. Um, and they start figuring out that this place is not what it seems. There's this strange building that a couple of them have encountered, and they try to visit it. It's it's this weird like mirage, and so they have to like find the actual building because that the one they see isn't real, which is again another PKD special of perception. Is it real? And it's something real. He hits on that a lot. And I have this section in what chapter am I in? Chapter 8 on page 93. I made a note to read this during the review because I think this summarizes right smack dab in the middle of the book how you're feeling. As I said before, uncanny valley, just something's off. You're trying to balance on one leg and you start to feel like you're tipping one way and then another. And it's just you don't know where you're going. He's very good at keeping the reader off balance. And so this character, Maggie Walsh, says, "But what a strange idea," Maggie Walsh says. Spektowski speaks about us being prisoners of our own preconceptions and expectations. And that one and that and that one of the conditions of the curse is to remain mired in the quasi-reality of these proclivities without ever seeing reality as it actually is. I found that to be the essence of a big part of the book. I think PKD really does a good job of um, immersing you in his questions of reality. Again, knowing who he was and what kind of themes he explored, he was just constantly trying to kind of figure out: is this real? Am I in a simulation? Are these characters? Can they trust the reality and the people that are in the reality? And I enjoy that sort of thing. I know some people it really trips them out. I think that this book gave me real shades of like Inception, but you didn't know you were in a dream the whole time kind of thing. That was really cool. um, and so when we get through a lot of the strange things, there's I think chapter maybe 8. I can't remember which chapter it is, but maybe it's before that, I think, where we have Susie who attempts to like seduce, I think it's Tony. No, she attempts to seduce Seth, and Seth, our main character, has a wife, Mary, who kind of barges in on them at one point. Then there's this tiny bug like creature who is actually the shape of that building that they were after, looking for. That I got to that chapter and I literally, in my notes, I feel like I wrote down like, what the heck is going on? Because it was so strange. It didn't make any sense to me at the time, but that's what's great about Philip K. Dick is you're trying to search for the deeper meaning. It's not, for the most part, just random ramblings. There's something that's going on here, and he's got a point to what he's saying, usually, in my experience. Again, second book I've read by him, so I'm just gathering what I can from that, from what I've read. We get near the end and we start to kind of go off the rails where Seth starts to see that something's going on. They're being kind of controlled by the people in the building. Um, I especially like the chapter where they visit the actual building and each one of them sees a different word. One of them sees the word winery. One of them sees the word is uh, oh crap, I'm forgetting all the different words, but they all end in like ERY, so they're vaguely similar, and each one of them is perceiving a different thing that this place is. Like Seth is like, this is a winery, let's go all go in and have cheese. And one of them is witchery. Mary, his wife, is like, let's go all in, or let me go in because I'm a woman and only witches, witchery, only women are allowed in, and you can like get your fortune told or something. And it just is another really cool way that PKD wrote perceptions. How do characters perceive things? Are we really all seeing the same thing here? Um, that was a really neat chapter. And so once Seth starts to realize some of the weird stuff that's going on, several characters throughout the book just they die in succession of we just see like a very we see an unraveling of them. They get killed by kind of this unknown force, um, and none of them really know who's doing it the whole time. There's also, I forgot to mention, there's this like religious aspect of it that PKD kind of introduces at the very beginning, which I found really interesting. Uh, he has a foreword at the beginning that talks about. He says the theology in this novel is not an analog of any known religion. It stems from an attempt made by William Serrell and myself to develop an abstract, logical system of religious thought based on the arbitrary postulate that God exists. So, like, they created a religion for this book that's vaguely similar to um, the Christian religion, um, at a very large, zoomed out scale. There's like the deity. There's the form destroyer, which I think is supposed to be the devil or the antichrist or whatever. You have the walker of the world, or is it Walker of the Earth or something? Yeah, Walker on Earth. That was the name. That felt like a very like Jesus kind of character, and so he infuses this religious terminology throughout, where they're praying and they're a couple of the characters are very religious, and they refer back to is it Stranowski, his book, the book. It's the Bible in this world, and so I found that kind of interesting and didn't really take much away from that as far as like, is that supposed to be a commentary on PKD's religious views of, again, all leading back to perception and reality. Are we all talking about the same thing, when it comes to religions? Was that his point? I'm not saying that. Was that his point? Um, or question, perhaps? And so, like, in a strange way, he asks these very deep philosophical questions through the wackiness of this book, because we're getting characters that are like, one of them like is in a seance and summons a sword and stabs another guy thinking he's the form destroyer, the devil. It turns out he was hallucinating the whole time, and like then he gets killed because he killed another one of the people in the settlement. And it's like it just like it moves at a very rapid, very crazy pace of that's why I think I read it in two sittings and I was so eager to finish it. Is it doesn't stop once it starts. He there's no wasted breath here, at least from what I read. I didn't see anything that was filler, and that I appreciated that a lot, because Do Androids Dream, there was no filler either. It was a tight. Oh no, I don't want to damage this book. Yet I'm throwing it around. Um, where did my bookmark go? There it is. There's no filler. It's a tight, very just gripping book. So anyway, we get to the end. We find out that they were all kind of plugged into a simulation the whole time, and they're stranded on a ship in the middle, just floating out in space, and there's no hope for them. And so they pass the time by going into these various simulations to essentially choose their dreams, rather than just walk aimlessly on the ship. And again, a metaphor for kind of life and the existence on this floating rock out in space, or floating spaceship in their case. And you know, Seth has this kind of struggle at the end where we see him kind of wrestling with, he's like, I just want to die. I don't want to be here anymore. We're floating on this ship. There's an older character named Miss Rockingham who is near the end of her life, and I think Seth talks about being jealous of that. He wishes the end would come for him, and I thought that part was very dark and very sobering because I think it did speak to some of PKD's experiences personally. I think he was a very conflicted human being who dealt with a lot of internal struggle. I watched Media Death Cult's video on the history of PKD, which is a great video. You should go check that out if you're interested in his story and his history. And he talked about how when he was born, I believe it's his twin sister who died early in her life, and there was a double grave built for the two of them. So he lived his whole life with a grave waiting for him, like it was already there. Normally people, you you maybe have the looming thought of death every once in a while, as we all do, but there's not a tombstone that's out there somewhere waiting for you. That, I think, is just one example of his struggle with life and death and morality, and not morality, just the sanctity of life itself, and how you use it while you're here. So Seth has this moment of he wants to just unlock the airlock, and it would suck out all the air and kill them all on the ship. And he holds back at the last moment because the intercessor also could be a Jesus figure in their made up religion in this book. Made up. I don't mean that. I just mean like PKD's religion that he creates in this book. Um, the intercessor comes in, this guy who's just like, don't do that. I'll take you somewhere else. You can be a plant who sleeps for 1,000 years, but can stay in the sun and know that you exist. And it's like this very, felt very drug fueled, hallucinogenic, like, it was weird. It was a weird way to describe it, but it was also kind of beautiful. Um, where he talks about that's Seth's like, that's what I want to do. I want to go be a plant in the sun. And so conscious of his own, like, of living, but also he doesn't need to deal with the woes of the world. And so the intercessor takes him away, and Mary, his wife, kind of goes looking for him. The whole group of people plug back into the simulation, and as does she. And we end on Mary starting a new starting a new chapter on Delmac O, the same planet, which they all agreed not to go back to. It ends tragically. Like, everybody dies, and they're all like, "That was a terrible simulation. We shouldn't do that one again." Yet we find them going back, and Mary's like, she asks the person in the simulation, transferring her to the planet, and says, like, "Where's Seth?" And they're like, "Who's Seth? He's not plugged into the world." And so she kind of just forgets he's there. And I've already been talking quite a bit in this video. I could keep going, but I want to try to keep these these reviews tight if I can, succinct in my thoughts. I thought in a page or a book that's under 200 pages, PKD does a masterful job of packing in and cramming so many different ideas and feelings and emotions and wacky just stuff, wacky characters and things that they do. He does it so well that you just don't find that very often with other writers. Where I think if I made an attempt to write a book in the PKD style, I would fail miserably because I would just be throwing random weird stuff at the wall, and it would not make any sense. I think he's one of the few authors that has this weird fiction that it feels like it makes sense, and there's a somewhat satisfying conclusion at the end where you can draw some conclusions based on what happened, and not go, "Wow, that was weird. That didn't make any sense." Because if you read the subtext, if you read stuff like the passage that I read, the short blurb, he's asking lots of pretty deep questions that, sure, he doesn't give any big answers to, but that's because he's wondering about them too as an author. He's wondering about perceptions of reality, and are we all seeing the same thing? Is there a universe out there beyond ours that we don't know about, that's multiple universes? And he just has a lot of great deep philosophical questions, and I admire him and his work greatly. I picked this up in the most recent book haul I did, and as if you go watch that video, you'll see I have several other PKD novels, Dr. Blood Money, Confessions of a Crap Artist. I have Martian Time Slip that wasn't in that book haul, but whatever. I have lots of other PKD that I can read. Ubik, Man the High Castle. If you're a fan of Philip K. Dick, you probably made it to this point in the video. Tell me what I should read next by him, because this was fascinating and really fun, and I got through it very quick. His novels don't take forever to get through. At least the first two that I've read don't. And yeah, I just want to know where to go next. I think Dr. Blood Money is what I want to read next by him, but I have I have a lot of the big ones. So tell me down below in the comments if you have thoughts about PKD, about this book, about other books by him. He fascinates me, and I'm assuming if you're here, he fascinates you too. So that's been my review of A Maze of Death by Philip K. Dick. If I had to give it a number, it's probably a 9 out of 10. This was a great book. I've yet to like review a book critically and talk about, maybe a couple that I've not loved, but so I'm trying to be real honest about the way I feel about books, and I guess I've just been very lucky at picking up great ones because I loved this book. Um, I know there are PKD fans out there who this is not their most they're not their most favorite, because it is a weird one, but the payoff was great at the end. I thought the twist at the end was fantastic, and so it gets a 9 out of 10 from me. Like I said, this physical book, I'll always kind of treasure this because I just it the building, the art style, the font, the old is this a Bantam? Is a Bantam? Bantam Books published this one. Um, I'm just very fond of this. So anyway, this was a fun one to do. I appreciate you being here. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.